What is up, friends? Welcome back to the channel. Halloween is fast approaching and we are officially in spooky season. So today's video is going to be about a new Halloween collection from Oden's Eye. These are the new Helaween eyeshadow palettes from Oden's Eye in collaboration with Angelica Nyqvist. This is kind of like the Halloween themed sequel to their first collaboration, the Hela palette, which I will show you in just a moment. These gorgeous new palettes just came in the mail yesterday and I'm super excited about them. I am wearing a look using both of them, one on each eye. So this is the packaging. I was actually really surprised by how beautiful the packaging is in person. I had seen it online, but it's really, really nice in person. I am a little bit under the weather today, so if I seem a little bit off, that's probably why, but I'm doing my best to be normal as I can be. Am I ever normal? So like I said, I am wearing looks using both palettes on my eyes right now. So this isn't going to be like a tutorial sort of a thing. It's going to be more of a comparison video. I want to talk about how these palettes compare to the other ones from Oden's Eye. I'm not going to compare them to anything outside of my Oden's Eye collection because these color stories feel very Oden's Eye to me, and I honestly can't think of anything from any other brands that I personally think compares to these or is super similar to them. I'm just scooting a little bit closer here so I could show you the eye looks. By the way, do you like my Gengar wearing my sweet tooth mask? Isn't that adorable? Sorry if you don't like clowns, but so on this eye, my right eye, I am wearing the, which one is this? Trick or Treat palette. So this is the more warm toned of the palettes. And it's kind of like, it's a little bit neutral, but you know, it has like these gorgeous greens and reds and oranges. It ended up, the look that I ended up doing, ended up looking a little bit Christmassy, because I combined a lot of the reds and the green, and then I have like this gold on the inner corner, and this could be a Christmas palette. I've seen other people say that as well. This could be a Christmas palette, which, by the way, we will be comparing it to the, I think the Merry Christmas palette is the one that I personally think it's most similar to, but we'll get to that soon. I don't remember exactly which shades I used when I did these looks because I was kind of just doing it. I was kind of just going with it. But for this eye in particular, I wanted it to be almost Pat McGrath. So I used these two kind of burgundy shadows. This one through the crease, this one on the outer corner. I also took this one under my eye a bit. On the lid, I took this red shimmer and kind of went all the way, almost all the way across. And I knew I wanted to use this gorgeous green, so I took that in here and kind of brought it over the red a little bit. And it did not get muddy, but it didn't combine as well as I wanted it to, because this one is kind of very soft and topper-like. And on my lid, it just looked a little bit odd, so I took a little bit of this minty green, kind of blue green, and also tap that on the center lid. I think altogether it does come together really nicely. This is the shade that I have on my inner corner on this eye, and I also took a little bit of that green. I don't even know if you can see underneath, just a tiny bit. Was that all I did with this eye? I think that's all that I did with this eye. I swatched all the shimmers in this palette though. They're really beautiful. Then with the Little Ghost palette, that's what this one is called. This is a more cool toned palette, and it's a little more like kind of vibrant and colorful. Look how beautiful that is. So this eye I really did just kind of go ham, and I just kind of did whatever I felt. I started with this purple, which by the way blends out gorgeously. Like it was so easy to blend out. I just kind of like stippled with the brush, because you know, if you go in with like sweeping motions, it with a darker or more pigmented purple, it can end up looking a little funky. So I just did like soft stippling motions and it blended out beautifully. And so then I went in with this really dark purple here. It's like almost a black. I did the outer corner with that. Also blended gorgeously with the soft stippling motions. Gosh, the rest of the eye though, I know I used this purple shimmer on like the outer part there. I know I used this very lavender shimmer. I'm not saying any names because I'm just trying to get through this portion. But I used this one here on the inner part here. Oh, I completely forgot to mention, I used this beautiful light blue in here. I even used this dark blue here underneath just because I wanted to see it. And then I kind of blended it out a little bit with this. And then the center lid, I took this shade. I was a little surprised that it didn't have more of a base when I applied it. It's kind of more just like that bright shimmery kind of shift. But did I use anything else from this one? Oh, I took a little bit of this kind of light lavender shade and just kind of blended the edge. Not that I really needed to, I just kind of wanted to. I just wanted to try that shadow. I think that's all that I did on that eye. Okay, so those are the eye looks. I can't wait to play with these palettes more. They're so beautiful. I will say, a lot of fallout. I mean, not as much fallout as you might expect, but the shimmers have a decent amount of fallout because they are very sparkly. I did not spray any of the shadows. I was able to, I think, wipe most of it away. My face is kind of shiny with the highlighter. Should I quickly tell you what else I have on my face? I have it all here. Just to quickly, I am using my About Face blush, this really cool tone purple, which actually looks really, really nice on my skin. I just took it on like the apples of my cheeks and kind of blended it back a little. Really beautiful. The shade is called Score, by the way, in case you were wondering. Then I went over it with this gorgeous highlighter from ColourPop, if I could ever get it open. I always have a hard time opening this thing. Look at how beautiful this is. This is from the Hocus Pocus 2 collection. I love this highlighter. If they bring this back this year, did they ever discontinue it? They probably did, right? If they bring it back, I would highly recommend. It's called Find the Book. Then on my lips, I used an About Face lip liner. This is like a almost reddish purple. The shade name is Madness. And then I just got this in the mail today. This is the new gloss bomb from Fenty. It's called Hologram. And it is beautiful. I need to play with it some more because I want to know why it's so much more expensive than the other gloss bombs. I know it comes in like this little ornament situation, but like, does it really have to be so expensive? Enough about that. You're here for the palettes. Let's talk. So these are the two palettes next to each other, the Trick or Treat palette and the Little Ghost palette. So let me just hold it up to the camera. I didn't take any pictures of them new and pristine. I was going to, but you know, life and such. I just didn't have time. But these are the palettes side by side. They do not have any kind of overlap or anything like that. I feel like it looks weird with me like looking through the palettes. They do not have any overlap or anything like that, but they do complement one another. There's like oranges and reds and things that I think complement one another. And you can definitely use these palettes together and create some cool looks. This is the first Hela palette from Oden's Eye in collaboration with Angelica Nyqvist. This is kind of like a grungy green palette or half grungy green palette with like this kind of like edgy pink thing going on the bottom with like these very dark, deep shades accompanying these like saturated pinks. It's a very interesting palette. It's definitely my current favorite Oden's Eye palette because it's just so, it's very different. I don't have any palettes that are really like this. And let's compare the old one to the new ones. So this is the Hela palette, the original, next to the Trick or Treat palette. The color stories, in my opinion, are very different. There's a little bit of crossover with the greens. Not crossover, but you know, there's those beautiful bright greens in both palettes. I'm trying to like figure out a way to hold the yellow shades closer together, but the yellow shades are you know, kind of akin to one another, but definitely not dupes. I think it would be interesting to use these two palettes together. I think that that would be a cool combination. And this is the original Hela palette next to the Little Ghost palette from the Helaween collection. By the way, I did not get the lippies from this collection. I forgot to mention that. I wasn't really interested in those, but I was interested in the palettes. I'm a fiend for palettes. But yeah, between these two palettes, I think that there's, you know, there's pinks in both palettes. I don't think that they're the same. I'm noticing on camera that this shade in the Little Ghost palette looks a lot more pink, but it's actually, if you turn it at like a certain angle, like, yeah, it's pink, but it also kind of shifts orange. Let me just take a little swatch of it. So it kind of like shifts. Gosh, it's really hard to see on camera, but it's a very shifty kind of a shadow. I don't know, it looks so pink on camera, but if you look at it at a certain angle in real life, it's more kind of orangey. We will get into swatch comparisons a little bit later. I'm going to take just a few swatches of shades that I think are kind of similar. I'll put them on my arm and we can, you know, decide how we feel about that. Let's talk about the Merry Christmas palette. This was a limited edition palette that came out last year at Christmas time. Very highly coveted palette that a lot of people wish had been made permanent. I want to compare these two. So this is the Trick or Treat palette, this is the Merry Christmas palette. The overlap with the kind of green tones is obviously no dupes, but they definitely have kind of similar vibes. Now that I'm looking at it in person, I'm realizing that the greens in this palette, the Merry Christmas palette, are actually quite a bit more kind of cool toned, whereas the ones in the Trick or Treat palette, they have more of that kind of limey green sort of a thing going on. There's like a little more, I guess, yellow to the undertone. It's not as cool. Honestly, again, I feel like these palettes would go nicely together, like using them together, but the Merry Christmas palette is actually much more cool toned. The reds, I will say, they're pretty close. I mean, you see those like red burgundy shades. I don't know where to put my face. But if you look at those kind of red burgundy shades, they are pretty close. We will swatch them later. Also, I feel like this kind of pinky shade looks pretty similar to the pinky shade that I used on my lid today from the Little Ghost palette. So let's compare these. Oh yeah, so the one in the Little Ghost palette, it has more of like a vibrant pink base, whereas the one in the Merry Christmas palette has more of like a purpley pink base, and the shift is also a bit more like bright blue in that one. Kind of like a, is it dramatic to call it a baby blue? Whereas the one in the Merry Christmas palette shifts, how would you describe that blue? It's just not as bright. It's more, I want to say like cobalt, but maybe it's not cobalt. Do you get what I mean though? It's just not as bright. Other than that pink though, I would say there's like no real overlap between these. This one though, I think overlaps more with the Little Ghost palette, but maybe not as much as you would think. This is the Christmas Eve eyeshadow palette. Let's first compare it to the Trick or Treat palette. Here they are. I seem to have decided that this is how I like to hold these palettes. I hope that you like that. But they don't have a ton of overlap. Like there's some golds that, I mean, they're not similar, but there's some golds. And well, I will say there's also like this kind of khaki kind of a color that looks similar to this mustard, but this one is more of a khaki green, whereas that one's a mustard color. There's also this green here that, you know, this one in the Trick or Treat is much darker, but they kind of give similar kind of tones. They probably go nicely together. Now, comparing to the Little Ghost palette, that purple up here, I think, kind of resembles the purple in the Little Ghost palette right here, but the one in the Little Ghost palette actually looks more cool toned, I would say. This one actually looks like it has a little bit more warmth and kind of pinkness to it. The blues are really not super similar. This one you could say is maybe similar to this one. This matte is kind of similar to this one. It's a little more, it has a little more like gray to it, whereas the one in the Little Ghost is more vibrant blue. And then there's like this light blue down here that's a little similar to this light blue, but again, a little more gray to the blues in the Christmas Eve palette. The next one that I want to talk about is the Solmane 2 palette. Beautiful, right? So this one has some minor overlap with the orange tones, especially like this one and this one. They seem similar. Ooh, we might have to swatch those because they are kind of close. And then the only other shade that I would say is kind of similar is this shade here in the Solmane 2 palette. Eternal is what it's called. I was tired of holding them that way. It's kind of similar to this one here called Deadly in the Trick or Treat palette. So the one in the Trick or Treat palette, Deadly, is definitely more yellowy and warm, but you can also see that those mattes are kind of similar. I'm kind of noticing that maybe those two are more similar to each other than these two. I'll just do some swatches after. We'll kind of get the definitive answer. I definitely get similar vibes between Solmane 2 and the Little Ghost palette though. Like if you look at them side by side, like those oranges, let's put the oranges next to each other. So like the oranges kind of have similar vibes. Solmane 2 also has like the blue row, kind of, you know, it has similar vibes. No dupes or anything, but similar vibes to the blue row in the Little Ghost palette. And then there's like this kind of lavender purpley row, which kind of goes with some of these shades here, maybe those two. Definitely no dupes, but very similar vibes. This here is the Red Dragon eyeshadow palette from the legendary Diversa collection. This is the only one that I have from that collection. This was in collaboration with Judy. This is what the color story looks like. Wow. So this is Red Dragon next to the Trick or Treat palette. And honestly, I'm actually quite surprised by how similar they feel and how they kind of feel like they go together, like they're extensions of one another. It's really, really nice, actually. I don't think that there's like any real overlap though between Red Dragon and the Little Ghost palette. I mean, there's a red. There's some burgundies. This is the Alva palette. This one, honestly, I'll show you this one next to these other ones, the new ones. But I honestly don't think that there's going to be much overlap. Like maybe those orangey kind of gold shades. Not really any overlap with the Little Ghost palette. Just a few more palettes. I know I've been filming for quite some time, and I do want to get to just a few swatches. This is Flora Story. This was from the Perfect World collection. Perfect World collection. I have all three of these palettes. They were all in collaboration with different influencers. This was in collaboration with Amanda from Makeup Just for Fun. I don't think that this is going to have any overlap. I mean, maybe with this more minty green. I don't think it's overlap. I think that this kind of goes nicely because like this palette, the Trick or Treat, has like these maroons and these greens, and then this one has the Flora Story palette has like the purples and the greens, but the greens are they're really not similar. These ones are very super cool toned, whereas these ones are just not. This one, you could argue that the purples are a little similar, but these ones I think are a bit more, would I call them warm? I don't know. They are a little more like true purple, I guess, whereas these ones are kind of, let me look at them. Are they cool toned? Yeah, I feel like they're just a little more muted. I think that's how I would describe it. I think if anything, maybe this shimmer is slightly similar to this one, but I don't think there's a ton of overlap between those two. This is the Sea Talk palette in collaboration with Lauren May from Lauren May Beauty. And this one is like part neutrals, part like blues, and then there's like a random, really beautiful but very random chartreuse and a really beautiful pink. Oh, there's like literally no overlap at all. The kind of minty shade in this Trick or Treat palette kind of looks similar to this like slightly green tinged blue shimmer in Sea Talk, but I don't think that they're that similar. For these two palettes, I think the closest are these two shades. I actually, when I was using this one today, it reminded me of this one. This one I have a little bit of an issue with though, because it doesn't stick together. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like a little too chunky and it kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't perform the way that I want it to. I'm talking about the one in the Sea Talk palette, whereas this one, I was a little surprised that it didn't have more base, but I didn't really have an issue with it. It applied really beautifully. The only other thing that's like maybe a little similar, well, actually, I guess this kind of burgundy, is that even a burgundy? It's kind of like a almost orangey red brown, this kind of like bricky red brown in the Little Ghost. It's kind of similar to the brown, the warmer brown in Sea Talk, and then like the chartreuse, it kind of, it's akin to this beautiful bright yellow. By the way, isn't it so cool that this palette has that bright yellow in it? I feel like that's like such a fun pop that makes the palette feel so much more special. Lastly, let's talk about the Planet Spirit palette. Looking at this, I'm wondering how much similarity there's going to be with this. Yeah. Surprisingly, I think that there's actually a decent amount of not full on like duping vibes or anything, but these palettes they got some similar things going on. They're not exactly the same, but they've got some similar things going on. Then compared to the Little Ghost palette, maybe the orangey shades are a little bit, let me see if I can hold these like this. Maybe the orangey shades are a little bit similar to one another. I don't know, what do you think? Okay friends, I'm gonna get some swatches going and I will be right back. Okay friends, so I just went ahead and swatched all of the kind of like bricky red, deep brown mattes from all of these palettes for comparison. So from this palette I took Vampire Fangs is what it's called, and Cemetery. So those are the first two shades that you'll see up top. This is Vampire Fangs. This is Cemetery. Cemetery is a little bit lighter. It's a little more kind of mauve. From the Little Ghost palette, I took this shade here. It's called Broomstick, and it's kind of like a orangey dark brown. That's this one here. And then the rest of these are from the other palettes. The next one that I did, this dark one here, is actually from the Hela palette, Soot. I remembered this shade being a little more purple, but in that swatch it looks just black and it looks very cool toned, so I guess kind of ignore that one because that one doesn't really look that much like these others. Next I took Hot Cocoa from the Merry Christmas palette and Poinsettia, I don't know how you pronounce it. That's the Hot Cocoa, that's Poinsettia. It's a lot more red, but it does look rather similar to the one from Little Ghost. The Hot Cocoa looks a lot like the one from the Trick or Treat palette. Not exact, but very, very similar. Then from the Red Dragon palette, I took the gorgeous shade down here called Fire, and then I also took Yin, which is the other kind of like warm brown, deep warm brown. So this is Fire, what a beautiful shade. And then this is Yin, also really gorgeous. I really, really like those shades. They swatched so buttery and nice. From Sea Talk, I took the warm brown called Driftwood. That's the one at the bottom there. And I think that in comparison to the ones from the new palettes, I think this one from the Christmas palette is very similar to this. I guess these two here are kind of similar. So the one from Red Dragon and the one from Sea Talk, they're kind of similar to this one from the Little Ghost, but not too much. And then, I don't know, I don't think any of them are quite similar enough to this kind of mauve or like dusty rose color from the Trick or Treat palette. Okay, friends, I can feel my body telling me that it is time for a rest. And, you know, like I said before, I am feeling a little under the weather, so I am going to listen to my body, and I'm going to do that. So I'm going to stop filming after I show you one more armful of swatches, but I'm going to come right back, and I'll probably film tomorrow, do some more swatches, and probably have another eye look on using these palettes. So let's just talk about these greens. So I wanted to compare the very green greens in the Trick or Treat palette to other very green greens from Oden's Eyes collection. That's like wicked hard to say. From Oden's Eyes collection. So I took this one here, that's the one on top, called Witch's Brew, and then I took Crypt Keeper down on the bottom. It's much darker. So those are the top two shadows. You're gonna notice once we get down here that things get funky, but some of these I literally just swatched just to show you that they don't appear the same on the arm or on the eye as they do in the pan. Moving down to this one here, this is from the Hela palette. It's this shade right here, and it's definitely, you know, it's kind of similar to this one, but it's definitely got more yellow to it. What's the name of this one? This is Venom from the Hela palette. So that's the first one. Moving into the Merry Christmas palette, I took this shade right here, which is like kind of a dark green, and then I also took this one here, which looks very green, but the reason that I swatched it is because it's definitely not. Like, once it's on, you can see it's a multi-chrome. So this is the dark green called New Year, and then Elf Wish, the one that's like not very green at all, is this one here. And I don't think that either of those look anything like the two from the Trick or Treat palette. This one is kind of dark, but it's nowhere near as dark as the one from Trick or Treat. And like I said, this one here, like in different lighting, you can kind of see the green. I'm not going to be able to get it on camera, I don't think, but it's not, it really is not showing up green. Even though it looks super green in the pan. I was really like surprised by that when I first tried that shadow. I thought it was going to be very green, and then it was very not green. The next shade, or I think couple of shades, yeah, are from the Flora Story palette. I took Lush and Best Buds. This one here is Lush. It's very cool toned, just like this one was from the Merry Christmas palette. Definitely not the same kind of tone as the, I think, very true green from, what is the name of the shade from Trick or Treat? Witch's Brew from Trick or Treat. It's more kind of true green, whereas these are more cool toned. And then this one here what are the names of these damn shades? Misty is a lot more kind of yellow toned. From the Planet Spirit palette, I took Familiar. That is that one there. It looks very kind of similar to the one from the Flora Story palette and very similar to the one from the Merry Christmas palette, but not that similar to either of the ones from the Trick or Treat palette. The last two shades are from the Red Dragon palette, and they are very, very shifty shades. They look much more green. Actually, on camera that looks red, but when I look at it like this, I wonder if I can get it on camera. Wait. The camera doesn't want to pick it up, but at the angle that I'm looking at it, it looks a lot more green. So I just wanted to show you that. And this one here, which is almost like that lime chrome kind of a shade, where it's like a kind of golden neutral with a green shift. So this one here is Luna, which is the more red one, and this is Solar Flare, which is the more kind of gold and green one. So that's the comparison with those. I don't think that any of these are really very similar to the greens in the Trick or Treat palette. Okay, so it's actually 2 days later. I felt even worse yesterday, so I didn't end up filming. I ended up taking off of work and just resting. But we're jumping back into it. I'm like super frustrated by the fact that I have been feeling sick because like I've mentioned, I'm trying to get out all these different videos, and having to take a day to just rest kind of messes with that. So I don't know, I'm frustrated, but trying to get back into it today. I'm feeling much better today for whatever reason. I don't even know what's wrong with me. I haven't had a fever or anything, whatever. We're going to talk about the oranges and like the coral and peach kind of shades in these palettes. I have an armful of shimmers and an armful of mattes. So starting from the top, this one here is from the Trick or Treat palette. It's this one here called Deadly, and so that one is like, it's kind of a rusty kind of a color. It's almost like a bronze, but a little bit more reddish orange. And then from the Little Ghost palette, both of these shades, they're both kind of more corally, and they have more pink to them, especially this one. This one has like a shift to it. In the pan, it always kind of looks a little bit more orangey corally. It's this one here, but on camera it just keeps looking like vibrant pink. So I did Screech, which is that one, that there, and then I did Magical, which is the more pinky one. Then from the Hela palette, oh wait, did I take one from Hela? Oh yeah. From the Hela palette, I took Hellfire, which is just like a peachy kind of a, it's this one here. It's kind of like a peachy, pinky, neutral, sort of a champagne shimmer. Doesn't really look anything like the ones from the new palettes. Then I did actually take from Alva, I took Sunflower, which is this one here. And as you can see, that's a ton more yellow than any of the ones in the new palettes. From the Merry Christmas palette, I took All Night, right? That's what, oh no, All Right. All Right? Yeah, All Right. That's what it's called. I took this very pretty orange here. That's that one, but again, it's a lot more yellow than the new ones. Solmane 2 is honestly the palette that I think overlaps with these new ones the most. I took both of these orangey shimmers, the more yellow one, and then this very kind of bricky sort of orange. So this is the yellow here, which actually looks very kind of gold when swatched out. And then this is the more kind of bricky one, which actually looks quite similar to the one in the Trick or Treat palette. Maybe a little bit more red and a little less orange, but it's actually super duper similar. I'm sure in the eye you wouldn't even be able to tell the difference. From Red Dragon, I took this shade called Amber. That's that one right there. Again, it's more like kind of neutral, kind of bronzy neutral. And then from Planet Spirit, I took this very vibrant shade here called Animalia. Yeah, Animalia. And this one is definitely very pinky, very corally. It does kind of look like this one, but with the pink aspect turned up a lot. So this is the one from, what is it, Little Ghost? And then this is the one from the Planet Spirit palette. So kind of similar, but definitely not dupes by any means. Now let's do the mattes. From Trick or Treat, I took Jack-o'-lantern, which is this very pumpkin-y orange shade. It's the one right on top. From the Little Ghost, I took Candy Corn, which is a very cute name. And that one is actually, you know, it's still very orange, but you can see it has a little bit more peachy pinkiness to it compared to the Jack-o'-lantern shade. From the Alva palette, I took the shade Daisy. It's actually a lot more of a yellow, but I just figured that I would compare it. So there it is. That's Daisy. Going back to the Solmane 2, I took both of these shades. Again, this one is much more yellow, and then this one is more orange. So there's the yellow one from Solmane 2, and then here's the orangey one. The orange one, it has that kind of peachy pinky quality, and it's very, very close, in my opinion, to the candy corn shade from the Little Ghost palette. I don't know why I'm turning my arm as if you're going to see like a shift, but I do think that those two are very, very similar to one another. From Red Dragon, I took Serene, this one here, just like a nice peachy neutral. It's definitely got some more pink to it than any of these other shadows, but I just thought I would show you the comparison. And then from Planet Spirit, I took the Habitat shade, this matte orange here, and that one actually looks a lot closer to the Jack-o'-lantern shade. They're honestly almost the same, maybe exactly the same. They're really, really close to one another. So that's interesting. So what did I say before? Oh, from the Solmane 2, that one is similar to the one from Little Ghost. And then from Planet Spirit, that one is similar to the one from Trick or Treat. Okay, so moving on to the blue shimmers in these palettes. I started with this shade down here from Trick or Treat. It's called Magic Potion. It's like a very pale, kind of minty sort of a blue. So that's the top shade there. From Little Ghost, I took Creepy, which is the next shade down there. Very nice. Then from the Christmas Eve palette, I took this very light blue and then this much darker blue shimmer. So there's that one and that one. And I don't think that these exactly dupe the ones from the Halloween palettes at all. But they kind of give somewhat similar vibes, right? Solmane 2, I took, again, the lighter blue here, and then this more, I guess, darker or more kind of true blue. So there's the lighter one. It's more similar to the one in the Christmas palette than it is the Trick or Treat palette. And then this one here, it's not like any of them, really. The last three shades are all from the Sea Talk palette. So there's the lightest one here that has a little bit of a green tinge, this one, and this one. I think both of these have a slight purple shift to them. I don't know if that's showing up on camera, but here's the lightest one, middle one, and the darkest one. And again, none of them are super close to either of the two new ones, at least in my opinion. I feel like, you know, some of these are more similar to one another than they are to the ones in the new palettes. Okay, so now for the purple shimmers. So I started with, there are no purple shadows in the Trick or Treat palette, but in the Little Ghost palette, I took this kind of lavender shade called Zombie, and then I took this one here called Ominous. So those are the top two shadows there, basically comparing everything else to those. I took this very light shade called Lilac from the Alva palette. That's that one there. It's really subtle and soft, which makes sense because it's a much more neutral palette, but it's really not very similar to either of the new ones. Then in the Christmas Eve palette, I took Wonderful, and then I also swatched Gorgeous, which is a multi-chrome. It looks very purple in the pan, but on my arm it looks much more blue. Like I could have swatched it with the blues. But here is Wonderful. That's kind of similar to this one, just again, softer, lighter. And then the multi-chrome is not similar, like, at all. Again, from the Solmane 2, I took the lighter shade over here called Meteor, and I took Hallucinations. That's what that's called. Hallucinations. So here is Meteor, and here is Hallucinations. I don't think that those really look that similar. I mean, this one is kind of like that, but softer and maybe a little warmer. Right? A little more like kind of pinky almost. From Flora Story, I took Magnolia, which is this one here. It's a little more kind of actually like grayish than the rest of these. It almost, like, compared to the rest of these, it almost looks like gray or like neutral. That's why I like that palette. It's purple, but it's like got this wearable thing going on. From the Planet Spirit palette, I took Kindred. Honestly, I think that Kindred is maybe the most similar to, I don't remember the name of it, the one from the Little Ghost palette, Ominous. But it's definitely more cool toned, I think. Like, it like has more blue to it. So no dupes or anything like that, but there's those. Okay, let's finish this up with the blues and the purples, the blue and purple mattes. I'm not going to be going over like the yellows and stuff because there's not enough of those kinds of shades for me to want to like compare them. Like I could compare this to maybe the first Hela palette, maybe the Red Dragon palette, but that's kind of it, I think. So I'm just gonna show you guys the purples and the blues, and then that'll be it. Also, I'm kind of tired of doing this, and I know that I have to edit this and get it out, and I also have to film my Sunday video. So these are the purple mattes. I don't see any real similarities between the two. Can you even see this? This is the really, really light purple in the Little Ghost palette. Also, the Trick or Treat palette, we're done with comparisons with that. It's just going to be this one versus the other palettes. But this here called Skeleton is this very light, kind of lavendery matte shadow. And then Little Ghost, this purple, is this one here. Very beautiful, like true purple, like a royal purple. Then we move over to Solmane 2. And Dream and Galaxy are the shades that I swatched here. So Dream is much more cool toned and much more opaque. And Galaxy is much more kind of reddish and kind of wine colored. From the Flora Story palette, we have Azalea and Orchid. So Azalea is, again, more opaque and also, I would say, much warmer. Kind of, maybe not reddish, but like maybe a little bit pinky. And then same thing with this, what was the name of that one? Orchid. It's, again, more kind of wine colored, whereas this one is more true purple. And then just for fun, I put this shade Pride from the Planet Spirit palette down here. It's basically like a pink compared to the rest of these, but I thought I would just include it. Now with the blues over here, there's a lot more of those. From the Little Ghost palette, I took Ghoulish, Haunted, and Haunted House. So there's Ghoulish, it's like a very soft blue. Haunted, which is like a blue jeans blue, and Haunted House, which is more like a kind of like a royal blue. From the Christmas Eve palette, I took Nightfall, Christmas Eve, and Night Sky. So Nightfall is this one here. It's a lot more like blue. Well, actually, it almost has a little bit of like a greenish tinge to it, to the undertone. Christmas Eve is, it's kind of like this one, but darker and maybe a little bit more kind of grayish, subdued. And then Night Sky is actually much more green tinged, like you can see compared to these other ones. It has a little bit of green in it. From Solmane 2, which is like the Lord of the Dupes. This palette is like their greatest hits or something. Soft Cloud, Neptune, and Nebula are the shades that I swatched. There's a lot of blues in their collection, so this one is probably the closest to the one from the Little Ghost, but it's more kind of white based, more, I don't know, pastel-y, would you say? I mean, they're both definitely pastels, but this one's just a little bit softer. This one is not very similar to the ones from the Little Ghost palette at all. This one here is probably the closest to the Haunted House one. When I say the name of this one was Nebula, where it's like a dark, true blue, but I think it is a little bit darker than the Haunted House shade. And then the last one on this arm is from the Sea Talk palette. It's Night Swim over here. Definitely has a little bit more of that kind of green gray undertone, not as green as this one. What was that, Night Sky? But it definitely has a little bit more of that going on, so definitely not a dupe for any of the ones from the new palette. Okay folks, I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that it helped you decide, you know, if you were trying to decide if you wanted these new palettes and you just didn't know if maybe you had similar shades in your collection. I know that I don't have every palette from Oden's Eye, and some of my palettes are actually discontinued, like the Christmas ones, the Red Dragon. I thought for a while that these ones had already sold out and been discontinued, but I think that they're still available. The Perfect World collection. I hope that you enjoyed. Oh, I am wearing another 2 looks using the palettes. This is the Trick or Treat palette, and this is the Little Ghost palette. I chose to go with some more warm tones from the Little Ghost today, and then kind of more sort of cool tones from the Trick or Treat palette. I don't want to go over every shade that I used, but I will say I did get a lot of fallout from this green shadow, this like dark green. It's very, very chunky, and it's almost like a pressed glitter in some ways, so I definitely got fallout from that. But yeah, I hope that you liked these looks, these 2, and the ones that I did the other day. I hope that I was able to inspire you. And yeah, tell me what you think of these palettes. Tell me what you think of the swatch comparisons. And I'll be seeing you guys again soon. I have to do my Sunday video now, but first I'm going to edit this one and try to get this one out. I also got my Patrick Ta stuff. It like literally just came. Super exciting. And I think I'm supposed to also get my Pat McGrath stuff today. So that's pretty cool. So expect more content real soon. I just hate the fact that I am not feeling well, because right when I was ready to get all the videos out, I ended up getting sick. It's super annoying. But anyway, I'll be seeing you guys again very soon, and I do hope that you have a great week in the meantime. Peace!